I'm 32 years old, and I've learned that the people who smile widest at family dinners are sometimes the ones sharpening knives in the kitchen. My name is Vanessa Torres, and this is the story of how my 8-year-old niece, a child the world believed couldn't speak, saved my life with 3 perfect sentences. If you're listening to this while driving through Dallas, cooking dinner in Seattle, or walking your dog in Boston, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this truth travels. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a warning. It started 6 weeks ago, on a gray Tuesday morning that smelled like rain and betrayal. Though I didn't know the second part yet, my sister Natalie called me at 7 a.m. I was half asleep, my hair in a messy bun, wearing the same NYU sweatshirt I'd been living in since my divorce finalized 3 months earlier. Her voice came through the phone, bright and chipper, the way people sound when they're asking for something big. V, oh my God, you picked up. Listen, I know this is last minute, but Derek surprised me with a 7-day cruise to the Caribbean. We leave tomorrow morning. Would you be able to watch Ruby? Please? You're literally the only person I trust with her. Ruby, my niece, 8 years old, with dark curls that bounced when she ran and eyes the color of October honey. Born with what doctors called selective mutism, so severe they'd eventually diagnosed it as a neurological speech impediment. In 8 years, she'd never spoken a single word. Not mama. Not help. Not even a cry that sounded like language. Natalie and her husband Derek had spent thousands on specialists. Speech therapists, neurologists, psychiatrists. They'd learned sign language as a family. Ruby was bright, expressive, communicated beautifully with her hands and her drawings. But her voice? Locked away somewhere the doctors couldn't reach. I'd been living in my sister's guest house for 2 months, since my ex-husband Marcus cleaned out our joint account and moved to Portland with a yoga instructor named Clarity. Yes, Clarity. The guest house was technically a converted garage behind Natalie's pristine colonial in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, but it had a bed, a bathroom, and it was free. Natalie had offered it with tears in her eyes, hugging me tight, telling me family takes care of family. Now I know she was setting up the board for a longer game. Of course, I told her that morning, I'd love to watch Ruby. You guys deserve a vacation. The relief in her voice sounded so genuine. You're a lifesaver, V. Seriously. There's food in the fridge, her iPad is charged, and I left instructions on the counter. She's been doing great with her homeschooling lessons, just let her work through the modules. Oh, and I made you some of that herbal tea you liked last time. The one that helps you sleep? It's in the blue tin in the kitchen. Drink it before bed. You've been looking so tired lately. Something about the way she said that last part made my stomach flutter, but I pushed it down. I was tired. Divorce tired. Heartbreak tired. Starting over at 32 tired. They left the next morning in a flurry of suitcases and sunscreen. Derek loaded their Tesla while Natalie gave Ruby a long hug, signing something elaborate into her small hands. Ruby nodded and signed back, then waved as they pulled away. The house suddenly felt very large and very quiet. Ruby stood in the foyer in her purple overalls and white sneakers, watching me with those careful honey eyes. She'd always been observant, but there was something different that morning. An intensity, like she was waiting for something. You hungry, sweetheart? I signed. One of the few phrases I'd learned well. She shook her head. Then she took my hand and led me to the kitchen. The house was pristine as always. Natalie kept everything magazine-ready: white marble counters, fresh flowers in crystal vases, photographs in silver frames showing their perfect life. There was one of their wedding on a beach at sunset. One of Ruby as a baby, wrapped in pink blankets. One of all of us at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, before Dad died. Before everything started cracking, on the counter sat a blue ceramic tin. Natalie's note was propped against it, written in her neat teacher handwriting. V, make sure you drink this tea every night before bed. It'll help with your anxiety and insomnia. You need to take care of yourself. Love you. And Ruby's small hand squeezed mine hard. I looked down at her. She was staring at the tin with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. Pure crystalline fear. What's wrong? I signed. She pulled her hand away and back toward the living room. shaking her head violently. Then she pointed at the tin and made an X with her arms. The universal sign for no, stop, danger. You don't want me to drink the tea? Another violent head shake. Okay, I said slowly. I won't drink it. I promise. She didn't look convinced. She stood there in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, weight shifting from foot to foot, clearly wrestling with something massive. Then she looked at the front door, at the driveway where her parents' car had been minutes ago, at me, back to the door, and when she looked at me again, her mouth opened, NTV. The voice was small but clear, perfectly articulated. The voice of an 8-year-old girl who'd been silent her entire life. I staggered backward against the counter, my hand flying to my mouth. Ruby, don't drink the tea Mom made. Her honey eyes were wet now, filling with tears. She plotted this. She's been plotting it for months. You're not supposed to wake up when they come back. The kitchen tilted. The white marble swam in my vision. What are you saying? You can talk? I've always been able to talk, Ruby whispered. But they told me I'd ruin everything if I ever did. They said if I ever spoke, especially to you, they'd send me away forever, to a place where bad children go. A tear rolled down her cheek. I didn't want to go away from you, NTV. You're the only one who's ever been nice to me without wanting something back. My legs gave out. I slid down the cabinet to the floor, my whole body shaking. Ruby, I don't understand. She came to me then, this tiny girl with her terrible secret, and sat cross-legged on the kitchen tile. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears. Mom and Derek aren't my real parents. Not both of them. Derek is my dad, but Mom isn't my mom. My real mom was named Sophia. She was Dad's first wife. The name hit me like cold water. Sophia. I remembered Sophia. Derek's first wife had died in a car accident when Ruby was 6 months old. It had been tragic, a drunk driver, a rainy night, gone in an instant. Derek had been devastated. Natalie had met him at a grief support group 2 years later, and they'd fallen in love. Natalie always said she'd been blessed to gain both a husband and a daughter. Sophia didn't die in an accident, Ruby said quietly. I heard them talking about it when they thought I was asleep. Mom Natalie, she tampered with the brakes. She'd been having an affair with Derek for months. She wanted Sophia gone. My entire reality cracked down the middle. No, Ruby. That's impossible. Your mom, my sister, she wouldn't. There's a box, Ruby interrupted. In their closet. Behind the sweaters on the top shelf. There's a metal box with a lock, but I know where they keep the key. It's taped under the bathroom sink, behind the pipe. Inside the box, there are notebooks. Mom writes everything down. She wrote about Sophia. She wrote about how she cut the brake line and watched her leave that night. She wrote about you too. Ice flooded my veins. Me? Ruby nodded, wiping her eyes with her small fists. After your divorce, when you had nowhere to go, Mom told Derek this was perfect. That you were broken and desperate and no one would ask questions if you died in your sleep from an overdose. She's been grinding up pills, sleeping pills, and other stuff and mixing them into that tea. A little bit at a time over the past 2 months, building it up in your system. The doctors would say you were depressed and took too much. Everyone knows you've been sad since Marcus left. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The garage, the converted guest house, the free place to stay while I got back on my feet. The sisterly concern, the herbal tea for my anxiety. Why? I choked out. Why would she do this? Dad's life insurance, Ruby said simply. He had a $2 million policy, and he left everything to you and Mom equally. If you die, Mom gets it all. That's what her notebooks say. She needs it because Derek's business is failing. They owe people money. Bad people, she wrote. People who'll hurt them if they don't pay soon. Dad, our father who died of a heart attack 18 months ago, suddenly and without warning. He'd been 58 and healthy. He'd gone to bed one night and simply never woken up. Oh God, I breathed. Dad, she killed Dad too, didn't she? Ruby's silence was confirmation. I don't know how long I sat on that kitchen floor. Time became meaningless. Everything I'd believed about my life, my family, my sister, all of it was painted on canvas, and someone had just thrown turpentine across the whole thing. Why are you telling me this now? I finally managed. You could have stayed quiet, stayed safe. Ruby's honey eyes met mine, and in them I saw something far older than 8 years. Because you're the only person who ever looked at me like I was real. Everyone else looks at the silent girl and feels sorry or uncomfortable. But you see me. You play games with me and draw with me, and you never treated me like I was broken. When you moved into the guest house, I wasn't scared anymore. I had someone on my side. Her voice cracked. I can't let her kill you. Even if they send me away. Even if I never see you again. I can't be quiet anymore. In that moment, I loved that little girl more than I'd ever loved anyone. But love doesn't stop poison. It doesn't erase murder. It doesn't fix the catastrophic reality that my sister, my own blood, had killed our father and her husband's first wife, and was actively trying to kill me. We need to call the police, I said, my voice shaking. Ruby shook her head hard. Not yet. We need proof first. If you just accuse her, she'll say you're crazy from the divorce. She'll say I'm making things up because I'm a weird kid who doesn't talk. We need the notebooks. We need evidence. She was right. An 8-year-old's word against a respected elementary school teacher with a spotless reputation? My word as the recently divorced, depressed younger sister living in her garage? We'd be dismissed immediately. Show me, I said. We went upstairs to the master bedroom. It felt like trespassing, like crossing into enemy territory. Natalie's perfume hung in the air, something floral and expensive. The bed was perfectly made with decorative pillows arranged just so. Ruby dragged the desk chair to the closet and climbed up. I helped her reach the top shelf, pushing aside cashmere sweaters until my fingers hit metal. A lockbox exactly as she'd described. The key was where she said it would be. Taped behind the bathroom sink pipe in a small plastic bag. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. Inside the box, 3 black composition notebooks, a flash drive, and a burner phone. I sat on the edge of my sister's bed and opened the first notebook. Natalie's handwriting. Neat, careful, methodical. Dated entries like a journal. Starting 4 years ago. March 3rd, met with Derek again. Sophia suspects nothing. She's so trusting it's almost boring. Derek says the business is drowning. We need capital. I told him I'd think of something. May 18th, did research on brake systems. It's easier than I thought. 1 cut in the right place, enough for a slow leak, and by the time she's on the highway, June 2nd, it's done. Derek doesn't know it was me. He never will. He thinks it was an accident, a tragic coincidence. In 6 months, when it's appropriate, I'll be there to comfort him. And Ruby comes with the package. My stomach heaved. I ran to their bathroom and vomited into the pristine white toilet. Ruby stood in the doorway, watching with sad, ancient eyes. I forced myself to keep reading. The second notebook covered the past 2 years. Her relationship with Derek. The mounting debts from his failed real estate investments. The loan sharks. The desperate need for money. And then, dated 6 months after Dad's death. February 10th, the insurance money isn't enough. Not with Derek's debts. But Dad left everything split between me and Vanessa. If something happened to V, I'd get her half. 2 million total. That would clear the debts and give us breathing room. February 28th, V's marriage is falling apart. Marcus is cheating. She's vulnerable. If I offer her the guest house, position myself as the supportive sister, I can control the environment. April 3rd, she moved in today. She looks terrible. Depression is the perfect cover. Everyone knows she's been struggling. If she died of an overdose, no one would be surprised. April 15th, started adding crushed Ambien to the herbal tea blend. Just small amounts. Building it in her system slowly. 3 months should do it. By the time we get back from our anniversary cruise, she'll have drunk enough of the final batch that her heart will stop in her sleep. Clean, simple, tragic. There were detailed notes about dosages, about timing, about how she'd cry at my funeral and no one would ever suspect. The third notebook was worse. It contained printed screenshots of text messages between Natalie and a man named Victor. Discussions of money owed, threats, implications that if the debt wasn't paid by August, Derek would be found in pieces. And there were notes about Ruby. July 8th, Ruby saw me making the tea. I think she knows something's wrong, but she can't tell anyone. That's the beautiful part. Even if she tried, Who would believe a mute child over me? Still, I told her again tonight. If she ever speaks, especially to Vanessa, she'll be sent to an institution. Children who break the rules don't get to stay with their families. She cried but nodded. She's terrified of being sent away. Good. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the house down. I wanted to grab Ruby and run as far as we could go. Instead, I took photos. Every page of every notebook. The flash drive. Everything. We need to get this to the police, I said. Right now. Wait. Ruby's voice was quiet but firm. If we go to the police now, Mom and Derek will know something's wrong. They'll come back early. They have friends who might warn them. We need to be smart. What are you saying? You should drink the tea, Ruby said. I stared at her. Not the real tea. She clarified quickly. But we should make it look like you did. Pour it down the sink. Leave the cup by your bed. Act sick tomorrow. Really sick. So when they come back and find you barely alive, they think their plan worked. But we'll have already called the police. We'll have already given them everything. They'll walk right into a trap. This 8-year-old child had been living with monsters, planning survival, staying 3 steps ahead just to make it through. Okay, I said. We do it your way. That night, I poured the poison tea down the sink and rinsed the blue tin clean. I put the empty cup on my nightstand in the guest house. I lay in bed and thought about how close I'd come to dying without ever knowing why. Ruby slept in my bed that night, curled against me like she was afraid I'd disappear. Before she fell asleep, she whispered, "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for saving me." I whispered back. The next morning, I called my college roommate, Jennifer Park, who'd become a prosecutor in Richmond. I told her everything. I sent her the photos. Within 2 hours, there were detectives at the house. Detective Rachel O'Coy was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind face. She looked at Ruby, at me, at the evidence, and said, "We're going to handle this very carefully. If what you're telling me is true and this documentation suggests it is, we need to catch them in the act." They set up surveillance. They coached me on what to do. I was to act increasingly sick over the next few days. Lethargic, confused. Ruby would panic and use Natalie's iPad to send a message to the ship, and very sick. Please come home. The plan was to draw them back early. Make them think their timeline had accelerated, that I'd drunk too much of the tea too quickly. When they arrived, they'd find not a dead sister, but detectives with warrants. Ruby played her part perfectly. She sent the message on day 3. Natalie responded within an hour. On our way. Stay with Auntie. Don't let her drive anywhere or call anyone. We'll be there tomorrow. Don't let her call anyone. Don't let her get help. Let her die quietly. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I watched from the guest house window as their Tesla pulled into the driveway. Natalie got out first, her sundress floral and bright, her skin tan from the cruise. She looked happy, relaxed. She had no idea that Detective O'Coy and 3 other officers were watching from unmarked cars down the street. I'd been instructed to stay in the guest house, to look weak. I lay on the bed, practicing shallow breathing. Natalie came through the door like a concerned sister, Ruby trailing behind her. "V? Oh my God, V. What happened?" I let my eyes flutter. So tired. Can't. The tea. Her face did something complicated. Concern for the cameras she didn't know were there. But underneath, I saw it. Satisfaction. Relief. The look of someone watching a plan come together. "Don't worry, sweetie. I'm going to take care of everything." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling 911. I don't think that'll be necessary," Detective O'Coy said from the doorway. Natalie spun around. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. "Mrs. Natalie Chen Torres, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and the murders of Sophia Chen and Robert Torres." Derek came running in from the house. Stopped dead when he saw the badge. "What? What's happening?" "Mr. Derek Chen, you're also under arrest as an accessory to attempted murder." The next few hours were chaos. Rights being read. Handcuffs. Natalie screaming that I was lying, that I was crazy, that I'd always been jealous of her perfect life. Derek crying, saying he didn't know. He'd never known about Sophia, about Dad, about any of it. I don't know if I believe that last part. The notebook suggested Derek was willfully blind at best. Ruby stood next to me the whole time, her small hand in mine, watching her legal guardians being taken away in police cars. When it was quiet again, Detective O'Coy knelt down to Ruby's level. "You're a very brave girl. What you did took incredible courage." Ruby looked at her steadily and said, in that clear, perfect voice, "I just didn't want Auntie V to die like my real mom did. She's the only family I have that ever loved me." The trial took 8 months. The notebooks were damning. The flash drive contained financial records proving motive. The burner phone had texts with the loan shark. They exhumed Dad's body. Traces of a drug that mimics heart attacks were found in his system. They reinvestigated Sophia's accident. The brake line showed signs of intentional tampering that had been missed the first time. Natalie was convicted of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. She got life without parole. Derek got 20 years as an accessory and for his role in the financial fraud that had motivated everything. In court, when they read the verdict, Natalie looked at me with so much hatred I felt it like a physical blow. But I looked right back. I didn't flinch. "You don't get to kill our father, kill an innocent woman, try to kill me, and traumatize a child without consequence." Ruby came to live with me. Legally, officially. I adopted her 6 months after the trial ended. We moved to a small town in North Carolina, near the mountains, far from Richmond and all its ghosts. She's 10 now. She talks all the time, never stops actually. Makes up for lost years. She's in therapy, processing everything she went through. Some days are harder than others. But she smiles. She laughs. She draws pictures of mountains and flowers instead of locked doors and blue tins. I started my own graphic design business from home so I could be there for her. The insurance money, Dad's life insurance that Natalie had killed for, I put it all in a trust for Ruby's future. College, whatever she needs. I didn't touch a penny for myself. It felt like blood money. We have quiet mornings now. Ruby makes toast and I make coffee, and we sit on our porch watching deer in the yard. She tells me about her day, about her friends at school, about the book she's reading. Normal things. Beautiful things. Sometimes she has nightmares. Sometimes I do too. We wake up reaching for each other, making sure we're both real, both safe. Last week, she asked me, "Do you think Mom Natalie, do you think she ever loved me at all?" I pulled her close. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I know I love you. And I know you saved both our lives by being brave enough to speak." "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Auntie V, will you always keep me?" "Always," I promised. "You're mine now. No one's sending you anywhere. Ever." She believed me. I saw it in her honey eyes. Trust. Finally, after so many years of fear, if there's a lesson in all this, it's that the monsters aren't always strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they're the people who pass you the salt at dinner, the ones who know how you take your coffee, the ones who share your blood. But it's also this. Love is louder than silence. Truth is stronger than poison. And sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important words. Ruby spoke when it mattered most. She broke years of self-imposed silence, risked everything she'd been taught to fear, because love demanded it. She saved my life, and in return, I promised her something simple. You will always be heard. You will always be safe. You will always be loved. That's not revenge. That's survival. That's healing. That's what we build from the ashes of betrayal. Every morning now, I make us herbal tea. Real herbal tea. Just chamomile and honey. Ruby watches me make it, and sometimes she still flinches when she sees the kettle. But then she remembers where we are, who we're with, and she relaxes. We drink it together on the porch, watching the mountains turn gold in the sunrise, and we talk about everything and nothing, about the past and the future, about pain and hope and how you carry both. My sister tried to silence us both, Ruby with threats, me with poison. But we're still here, still speaking, still breathing, still winning. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Drop a like if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more true stories like this. And please, if someone you love seems too perfect, too controlled, too insistent that you trust them completely, pay attention. Ask questions. Trust your instincts, because the people who love you shouldn't need to control you. They shouldn't need you silent. Real love sounds like an 8-year-old girl whispering, "Don't drink the tea," and then speaking loud enough to save 2 lives. But the story doesn't end there. Because revenge isn't just about surviving, it's about making sure the truth echoes so loud that no one can ever silence it again. 3 months after Natalie was sentenced, I received a letter. Not from her, she'd tried to write me twice from prison, and I'd returned both letters unopened. This one came from a woman named Diana Hartwell in Seattle, Washington. "Dear Miss Torres, I saw your story on the news. I'm writing because I think your sister might have killed my daughter too." My hands shook as I read the rest. Diana's daughter, Michelle, had been Natalie's college roommate 15 years ago. Michelle had died of what was ruled an accidental overdose during their senior year. She'd been found in their dorm room with a bottle of sleeping pills and a half-empty bottle of vodka, but Michelle didn't drink. She'd been a devout Mormon, studying to be a social worker. Diana had never believed the overdose story, but the police had found a suicide note on Michelle's computer. Case closed. The note never sounded like Michelle. Diana wrote, "She would never take her own life." And she told me the week before she died that Natalie had been acting strange. That she'd found Natalie going through her personal things. That there was a boy Michelle was dating, Connor Bradford, and that Natalie was obsessed with him. After your sister's arrest, I contacted the prosecutors. They're reopening Michelle's case. They think Natalie might have killed her to get to Connor. I'm writing to thank you. If you and Ruby hadn't been brave enough to speak up, my daughter's real story would have stayed buried forever. I sat in my kitchen, Ruby doing homework at the table, and I cried. For Diana, for Michelle, for Sophia, for Dad, for all the lives Natalie had destroyed or tried to destroy in her relentless pursuit of whatever she wanted. NTV. Ruby looked up from her math worksheet. "Are you okay?" I wiped my eyes. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay. Someone else got their truth back because of what you did." She came over and hugged me tight. At 10 years old, she was already wise beyond measure. "Good people should know the truth," she said simply. "That's what you always tell me." She was right. I did tell her that, and I meant it. I called Diana that night. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about Michelle, her kindness, her dreams of helping foster children, her laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She told me about 15 years of grief and unanswered questions, of being called a conspiracy theorist by police who'd closed the case quickly because a pretty college girl's suicide was easier to file away than a murder investigation. The prosecutors found something, Diana told me, her voice cracking. When they reopened the case, they checked Natalie's old laptop, the one she'd turned in when she graduated. She'd deleted files, but the ID forensics team recovered them. There were searches for how to fake a suicide note and drugs that mimic voluntary overdose. There were drafts of the note they found on Michelle's computer. Natalie wrote it. "She killed my baby so she could have some mediocre boy who dumped her 6 months later anyway." The rage that flooded through me was white hot and purifying. "Diana," I said carefully, "how would you feel about telling your story publicly? About Michelle, about what Natalie did, about how the system failed you?" There was a long pause. Then, "What did you have in mind?" Within 2 weeks, I'd launched a podcast. I called it The Quiet Crimes. The tagline: stories of victims whose voices were stolen and the truth that speaks for them. The first episode was Diana's story. She spoke about Michelle with such love and pain that thousands of people listened and wept with her. We released police documents, the recovered computer files, expert analysis showing how Michelle's death had been staged. By the end of the episode, there was no doubt. Natalie had murdered her college roommate in cold blood. The second episode was Sophia's story. I interviewed Derek's parents, who'd always suspected something was wrong with their daughter-in-law's death but had been too grief-stricken to push. I interviewed the mechanic who'd examined the brake line and noted the suspicious cut in his report, a report that had been buried in the file and never followed up on. I interviewed Ruby, who spoke about her real mother in fragments of memory, her songs, her smell of vanilla, her soft hands. My mom Sophia loved sunflowers, Ruby said into the microphone, her voice steady. Natalie ripped out all the sunflowers from our garden the week after she married my dad. She said they were weeds, but they weren't weeds. They were my mom. The episode went viral. 3 million downloads in the first week. The third episode was about Dad. I interviewed his colleagues, his friends, the neighbors who'd seen Natalie visiting him frequently in the months before his death, always bringing him food, always insisting he eat her cooking. I spoke with the medical examiner who'd reviewed his exhumed remains and found traces of digitalis, a heart medication that had never been prescribed. In high doses, it causes heart attacks that look natural. My father was a history teacher, I said into the microphone. He taught high school for 30 years. He believed in truth, in primary sources and evidence. He would want the world to know what really happened to him. So this is his primary source. This is his evidence. My sister poisoned him because she wanted his money, and she almost got away with it. By episode 4, major news networks were picking up the story. Dateline wanted to do a special. 60 Minutes called. The New York Times ran a feature article titled "The Sister Who Spoke: How One Woman's Investigation Exposed a Serial Killer." Because that's what Natalie was. Not a grieving sister or a loving stepmother or a dedicated teacher. A serial killer who'd murdered at least 3 people and attempted to murder a 4th, all while maintaining a facade of suburban perfection. The podcast became my full-time work. Other families started reaching out, people who'd lost loved ones to suspicious circumstances, who'd been dismissed by police, who'd been told to move on and accept accidents or suicides that never sat right. I investigated their cases. I gave them a platform. I made sure their dead were heard. And the donations that came in? I put every penny into a foundation. The Ruby Chen Foundation for Silenced Victims. We funded reopened investigations. We paid for forensic reviews. We hired lawyers for families who couldn't afford them. Ruby, now 11, started speaking at schools about finding your voice, about how silence can be survival but speaking can be salvation. She was magnetic. Kids loved her, teachers loved her, and she never shied away from the hard parts of her story. I pretended I couldn't talk for 8 years, she told an auditorium of middle schoolers once. I let adults tell me who I was supposed to be. But the truth is, your voice is the most powerful thing you own. Don't let anyone take it from you. Not bullies, not parents, not anyone. The applause was thunderous. 1 year after Natalie's conviction, on a crisp October afternoon, Ruby and I drove back to Richmond. Not to the house where it all happened that had been sold, the money put into her trust fund. We drove to the cemetery. We stood in front of 3 graves: Sophia Chen, Robert Torres, Michelle Hartwell, whose body Diana had moved from Seattle to be buried near the others, near the people who understood. Ruby placed sunflowers on Sophia's grave. I placed a book Dad's favorite history text on his. Diana, who'd driven from Seattle to meet us, placed a wind chime on Michelle's. They tried to keep you quiet, Ruby said, her voice clear in the autumn air. But we won't let them. We'll keep telling your stories until everyone knows what happened. Until everyone remembers your names. We stood there for a long time. The 4 of us, 3 women, 1 girl, and 3 ghosts who could finally rest because the truth had been told. As we walked back to the car, Diana took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not letting this go, for not moving on, for being angry enough to fight." "Anger isn't always destructive," I said. "Sometimes it's the fuel that keeps you going until justice is done." Ruby looked up at me. "Is it over now? Did we win?" I knelt down to her level, cupped her face in my hands. "Baby, we won the moment you opened your mouth and spoke the truth. Everything after that was just making sure the world listened." She smiled, that bright, uninhibited smile she'd learned to wear in freedom. "Good, because I have a lot more to say." "I know you do." I laughed. "And I can't wait to hear every word." We drove home to North Carolina as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Ruby played her music loud, some pop song about being unstoppable, and sang along at the top of her lungs, beautifully off-key. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. This child who'd saved my life, This girl who'd found her voice in the darkest moment and refused to ever be silent again. Natalie had tried to bury all of us, Michelle in a dorm room, Sophia on a highway, Dad in his sleep, me in a guest house bed, and Ruby in a prison of enforced muteness. But we'd clawed our way out of every grave she dug, and now we weren't just surviving. We were speaking. We were fighting. We were winning. The podcast is still going strong. We're on episode 47 now. 47 stories of silenced victims who finally got their truth told. 47 families who got answers. 12 cold cases reopened. 4 convictions. Countless lives changed. Ruby just turned 12 last month. She wants to be a lawyer when she grows up. Specifically, a prosecutor for victims' rights. She's already more articulate and passionate than most adults I know. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the mountains are dark silhouettes against the stars, I think about that moment in Natalie's kitchen. The moment Ruby opened her mouth and gave us both a future. Don't drink the tea. 3 words that changed everything. 3 words that led to justice for 4 murdered people. 3 words that launched a movement. I never did drink that tea, and I never will. Not from anyone who tells me to trust them blindly, who needs me weak to feel strong, who mistakes love for control. These days, Ruby and I make our own tea. We choose our own ingredients. We decide our own doses, and we drink it together, in the sunshine, surrounded by the evidence of our survival, laughter, safety, truth, and the kind of love that doesn't need anyone to be silent. If you're still listening, still reading, still here with me at the end of this story, thank you. Share this. Tell people. Because somewhere out there is another Ruby, another person trapped in silence by someone they should be able to trust. And they need to know. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Speaking up can save your life. It saved mine. It saved Ruby's. And it gave Michelle, Sophia, and my father something they'd been denied. The final word. So here's my final word to anyone who's ever been told to stay quiet, to not make waves, to trust someone who makes you feel afraid. Speak. Speak loud. Speak clear. Speak until the truth can't be buried anymore. And if you can't speak yet, if you're still too scared or trapped or hurt, hold on. Because somewhere, someone is finding their voice. Someone is telling your story. Someone is fighting for you. We are. Ruby and I are. And we're not stopping until every silent victim is heard. That's not just survival. That's victory. That's revenge served with the coldest, most satisfying dish of all. The truth.